November 18th, 1993, Sony Music Studios, New York City. The producers arrived early that morning. They had done this dozens of times before. MTV Unplugged was their show, their format, their rules. They knew exactly what worked. Eric Clapton had done it. Mariah Carey had done it. The formula was simple. Take a massive artist, strip away the electric guitars and the stadium production, let them play their biggest hits in an intimate acoustic setting. The audience loves it. The ratings soar. Everyone wins. Alex Coletti, the show's producer, walked through the studio with a clipboard in his hand. The set was almost ready. Standard unplugged setup, warm lighting, candles scattered around for atmosphere, a semicircle of chairs for the small studio audience. Nothing special. Nothing different from the dozens of unplugged episodes they had filmed before. Nirvana was the biggest band in the world. Nevermind had sold over 10 million copies. Smells Like Teen Spirit had changed rock music forever. In Utero, their new album had debuted at #1 just 2 months earlier. MTV wanted hits. They wanted Smells Like Teen Spirit. They wanted Come As You Are. They wanted Heart-Shaped Box. They wanted the songs that had made Nirvana famous. The songs that every person in America knew by heart. Coletti had sent the set list suggestions to Nirvana's management weeks ago. The response had been silence. Then 3 days before the taping, Kurt Cobain finally called back. He had requests. The first request was strange. Kurt wanted the stage decorated with black candles. Not the warm, inviting candles that Unplugged typically used. Black candles. Funeral candles. The kind you would see at a wake. The second request was stranger. Kurt wanted stargazer lilies everywhere. White lilies. The flowers of death. The flowers people send to funerals. Coletti hesitated on the phone. This was supposed to be a celebration. This was supposed to be intimate and warm and inviting. This was supposed to sell records. "Are you sure about the lilies?" Coletti asked. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Kurt's voice was soft, almost a whisper. "I'm sure." The third request came the morning of the taping. Kurt arrived at the studio looking exhausted. His hair was unwashed. His cardigan was old and worn. He looked like he had not slept in days. He probably had not. He handed Coletti a piece of paper, the set list. Coletti looked at it and felt his stomach drop. No Smells Like Teen Spirit. No Come As You Are. No Lithium. No In Bloom. None of the hits. None of the songs that had made Nirvana the biggest band in the world. Instead, the set list was filled with obscure deep cuts, cover songs, a Meat Puppet song, a David Bowie song, a lead belly song from the 1940s. "Kurt," Coletti said carefully, "this is unplugged. People are expecting the hits." Kurt did not look at him. He was tuning his guitar, an old Martin acoustic that looked like it had been through a war. "They'll get what they get," Coletti tried again. "The network is going to ask questions. They're expecting Teen Spirit. They're expecting the songs people know." Kurt finally looked up. His eyes were tired. So tired. There was something in them that Coletti could not quite identify. Not anger. Not defiance. Something else. Something that looked almost like resignation. "I'm not playing Teen Spirit," Kurt said. "I'm not playing it." There was no argument in his voice. No hostility. Just a quiet finality that made Coletti understand that this was not a negotiation. The studio audience began arriving around 5 p.m. About 100 people, mostly MTV contest winners and music industry insiders. They filed into the small studio, taking their seats in the semicircle around the stage. They were excited. They were about to see Nirvana, the biggest rock band in the world, perform an intimate acoustic set. This was going to be incredible. Then they saw the stage. The black candles were everywhere, dozens of them, their small flames flickering in the dim light. The white lilies filled every corner, their heavy perfume mixing with the smell of burning wax. A crystal chandelier hung above the stage, casting strange shadows on the walls. It looked like a funeral parlor. It looked like a wake. The audience members glanced at each other. This was not what they had expected. This was not the warm, intimate, unplugged setup they had seen on television. This was something else entirely. Backstage, Kurt sat alone in a corner. His bandmates, Chris Novoselic and Dave Grohl, were nearby, but they kept their distance. They had learned to give Kurt space. They had learned to let him be. A production assistant approached Kurt with a handheld radio. "Mr. Cobain, the producers are asking about the set list. They're saying maybe you could add Teen Spirit, just one hit, for the network." Kurt did not look up from his guitar. "No, they're saying it could really help with—" I said no. The production assistant retreated. Chris Novoselic watched from across the room. He had known Kurt since high school. He had watched him transform from a quiet kid in Aberdeen, Washington, into the voice of a generation. He had watched him struggle with fame, with the pressure, with the weight of being something he never asked to be. Chris walked over and sat down next to Kurt. "You okay?" Kurt kept tuning his guitar. His fingers moved slowly across the strings, adjusting, listening, adjusting again. "I'm fine. The producers are panicking. Let them panic." Chris nodded. He understood. He did not always understand Kurt, but he understood this. Kurt had never wanted to be a rock star. He had never wanted to be the voice of a generation. He had just wanted to play music. And now, for one night, he was going to play the music he wanted to play, the way he wanted to play it. The producers and the network and the audience would just have to accept it. At 7:30 p.m., the lights dimmed. The audience fell silent. Kurt Cobain walked onto the stage. He moved slowly, almost carefully, like a man walking into a church. He did not wave to the audience. He did not smile. He did not say anything. He just walked to his chair, sat down, and picked up his guitar. Chris and Dave took their positions. Pat Smear, the band's touring guitarist, sat nearby with an acoustic guitar. Lori Goldston, a cellist Kurt had personally requested, sat with her instrument ready. For a long moment, nothing happened. Kurt sat with his guitar in his lap, staring at the floor. The black candles flickered. The white lilies swayed gently in the air conditioning. The audience waited, holding their breath, not sure what they were about to witness. Then Kurt began to play. The first song was About a Girl. It was one of Nirvana's oldest songs, from their debut album Bleach, before anyone knew who they were. Kurt's voice was soft, almost fragile. The acoustic guitar was gentle, stripped of all the distortion and feedback that usually define Nirvana's sound. The audience listened in complete silence. This was not the Nirvana they knew. This was not the loud, angry, explosive band that had conquered the world with Smells Like Teen Spirit. This was something else, something raw, something vulnerable, something that felt like watching a man undress his soul in front of strangers. Song after song, Kurt played through his unconventional set list. Come As You Are was there, one of the few concessions to the hits. But even that song sounded different, slower, sadder, like a lullaby for the dying. Then came the covers. Kurt introduced the Meat Puppets, an obscure band from Arizona that most of the audience had never heard of. Kurt and Chris Kirkwood, the band's founders, walked onto the stage and joined Nirvana for 3 songs: Plateau, Oh Me, Lake of Fire. In the control room, the producers watched with growing anxiety. This was not what they had planned. This was not what MTV wanted. These were not hits. These were obscure songs that no one would recognize. The ratings were going to be a disaster. But on stage, something was happening. Kurt was singing Lake of Fire, a song about where bad folks go when they die, and his voice cracked with emotion. The audience sat frozen, unable to look away. There was something hypnotic about watching Kurt Cobain in this setting, surrounded by funeral candles and death flowers, singing songs about mortality and loss. Then came the moment that would define the entire performance. Kurt picked up his guitar and began playing a song that most of the audience did not recognize. The melody was simple, haunting. The chords moved slowly, deliberately, like a funeral march. I didn't know you rode the bus, Kurt sang, his voice barely above a whisper. It was The Man Who Sold the World, a David Bowie song from 1970. A song about identity, about meeting yourself, about not recognizing who you have become. Kurt sang it like a confession. His voice trembled on certain words. His eyes closed. His body swayed slightly with the music. The cello played a mournful counter-melody. The black candles flickered. The white lilies seemed to lean toward the stage, as if they too were listening. In the audience, people began to cry. They did not know why they were crying. They could not explain it. But there was something about watching Kurt Cobain sing this song, in this setting, surrounded by symbols of death, that broke something open inside them. The producers in the control room had stopped talking. They stood in silence, watching the monitors, watching Kurt pour himself into this obscure cover song that had nothing to do with Nirvana's hits, that had nothing to do with what MTV wanted, that had everything to do with something much deeper and much darker. The song ended. The studio was silent. For a long moment, no one moved. No one applauded. No one made a sound. They just sat there, in the presence of something they did not fully understand, something that felt sacred and terrible at the same time. Then slowly, the applause began. It was not the wild, enthusiastic applause of a rock concert. It was something quieter, more respectful, the kind of applause you might hear at a memorial service. Kurt did not acknowledge it. He simply moved on to the next song. The set continued. More obscure choices, more moments of raw vulnerability. Kurt covered Lead Belly's "Where Did You Sleep Last Night?", a murder ballad from the 1940s about a woman whose husband has been killed. He sang it with such intensity, such pain, that it felt like he was confessing to something. The final note hung in the air. Kurt screamed the last line. His voice shattered, his face contorted. For a moment he looked like a man in the grip of something beyond his control, something that was tearing him apart from the inside. Then silence. Kurt sat motionless, his guitar across his lap, his head bowed. The candles flickered, the lilies swayed. The audience held their breath. No one spoke. After what felt like an eternity, the stage lights dimmed. It was over. Backstage, the producers rushed to find Kurt. They wanted to talk about adding more songs. They wanted to do another take. They wanted to capture something they could use, something more commercial, something that would satisfy the network. Kurt was sitting alone in his dressing room. The door was open. He was holding his guitar, not playing it, just holding it. Coletti approached carefully. Kurt, that was something else. But the network is asking if maybe we could do another take of Teen Spirit, just one performance for the broadcast. Kurt did not look up. No, just one song. It would really help with "I Gave You What I Have." His voice was quiet, exhausted, final. That's all there is. Coletti stood there for a moment, not knowing what to say. Then he nodded and walked away. There was nothing else to do. The episode aired on December 16th, 1993. MTV had not known what to do with it. The set list was unconventional. The staging was morbid. There were no hits. There were no anthems. There was just Kurt Cobain, surrounded by funeral decorations, singing songs about death and loss and identity. They aired it anyway. 14 million people watched. The response was unlike anything MTV had ever seen. Phone lines were flooded. Letters poured in. People wrote about crying. People wrote about feeling something they could not explain. Critics called it one of the greatest live performances in rock history. But something else happened too. People started asking questions about Kurt, about his state of mind, about why he had surrounded himself with funeral imagery, about why he had sung all those songs about death, about why he had looked so tired, so hollow, so resigned. 4 months later, Kurt Cobain was gone. The black candles, the white lilies, the songs about death, the refusal to play the hits, the performance that felt like a funeral. It had been a funeral, his own. Years later, Alex Coletti would give interviews about that night. He would talk about the set list negotiations, about the black candles, about Kurt's quiet insistence on doing things his own way, about how he had not understood what he was witnessing until it was too late. "I thought he was being difficult," Coletti admitted. "I thought he was just being an artist, being stubborn, refusing to give us what we wanted. I didn't realize he was saying goodbye." Dave Grohl, Nirvana's drummer, would later say that he knew something was different that night. He knew it from the moment he saw the stage, covered in funeral flowers and black candles. He knew it from the way Kurt sang, the way he closed his eyes, the way he seemed to be somewhere else entirely. "It was a funeral," Grohl said. "We just didn't know who it was for." The MTV Unplugged in New York album was released in November 1994, 7 months after Kurt's death. It debuted at #1. It sold over 5 million copies in the United States alone. It became one of the best-selling live albums in history. But more than the sales, more than the critical acclaim, the album became something else. It became a document, a testament, a final message from a man who knew he was running out of time. Kurt Cobain had been asked to play his hits. He had been asked to give the audience what they wanted. He had been asked to be the rock star, the voice of a generation, the icon. Instead, he played a funeral, his own funeral, and 14 million people watched in silence, not knowing they were witnessing a goodbye. The black candles have long since burned out. The white lilies have long since wilted. But the performance remains. The songs remain. The image of Kurt Cobain, seated alone on that stage, surrounded by death, singing songs about loss and identity and the dark places we all carry inside us. He never explained why he made those choices. He never told anyone what he was thinking. He never said the words. But he did not need to. The music said everything. Sometimes the most devastating statement is made in silence. Sometimes the most powerful goodbye is the one that is never spoken. Kurt Cobain did not play Smells Like Teen Spirit that night. He played something far more important. He played the truth. And that truth still echoes today. Every year on the anniversary of his death, fans gather outside his old house in Seattle. They leave flowers. They leave notes. They leave guitar picks and candles and handwritten lyrics. They leave pieces of themselves. And many of them leave lilies, white stargazer lilies. The same flowers Kurt requested for that stage in November 1993. The same flowers that surrounded him as he sang his goodbye. The producers who worked on that show have never done another Unplugged quite the same way. The format continued, of course. Other artists came and went. Some followed the formula, some tried to push boundaries, but none of them ever captured what Kurt captured that night. Because what Kurt did was not a performance. It was not a show. It was not entertainment. It was a man looking at his own mortality and choosing to face it with music instead of words. It was an artist refusing to give people what they wanted and instead giving them what they needed to hear. It was a goodbye disguised as a concert, a funeral disguised as a celebration. The audience that night did not know they were witnessing history. They did not know that the tired man in the worn cardigan, the man who refused to play his hits, the man who surrounded himself with symbols of death, would be gone in 4 months. But somewhere deep down, they felt it. They felt it in the silence between songs. They felt it in the tremble of his voice. They felt it in the way he closed his eyes when he sang, as if he was already somewhere else, somewhere far away, somewhere none of them could follow. Kurt Cobain gave MTV exactly what they did not want. And in doing so, he gave the world something it would never forget. A funeral, a farewell, a final truth, spoken not in words but in music. 14 million people watched, and they are still watching today.